has been a very woman-dominated conversation this morning. Not that that's a bad thing. I actually find it to be a very nice thing. But in order to bring about a bit more balance, we are going to add some male energy into the equation. For our next panel discussion titled, From Ideas to Startups, the Young Innovators, it gives me great pleasure to welcome on stage Africa Business News' Alexander Leibner as he sits down with Gen Y and Gen Z business startups. Please join me on stage. He will be asking some questions. Is age just a number when it comes to starting businesses? From early stage investments to barriers of entry and bankable success, when is the right time? This panel also includes finalists from Forbes Africa's prized 30 under 30 list from East Africa. So let's make them all feel welcome and let's give them a round of applause.
Tanya Habimana is the CEO of Non-Zero Africa, an integrated marketing company with a focus on creating impact programs and enterprise development campaigns in Africa. She is a Rwandan entrepreneur with a passion for digital innovation and SME development in Africa. Charlene Nafula is the founder and CEO of Crystal River Products, a Kenyan manufacturing company for bio-based beauty and hygiene products. She is a multiple award-winning businesswoman. Nomvula Mambi is an award-winning Zimbabwean businesswoman dedicated to creating sustainable solutions to the problems facing urban communities in Zimbabwe. She is the founder and operations manager of Disruptive Innovation. Vivian Onano is a social entrepreneur and seasoned humanitarian who is recognized as an emerging woman leader with the courage to lead change on the African continent. She is a youth advisor to Global Education Monitoring Report, UNESCO, and the founder-director at Leading Light Initiative. The moderator is Alexander Leibner, head of ABN Event Productions.
I'm already intimidated. Africa's young female entrepreneurs, startups, women of power, from all over the continent. I mean, we've almost got every corner of the continent covered here. And you were talking about the under 30 meetup that we had earlier on this year. Also brought together some remarkable young Africans and also a continent that'll see an even younger and younger average come up over the next couple of years, which is on the one hand quite daunting, on the other hand quite exciting. But maybe to kick off, and we'll start off here on my left, what is it like starting and running a business as a young female entrepreneur in Africa?
Wow, that's a big question.
Ah.
What is it like? I want to say, and I think that has to do with who I am as a person and how I've kind of led my life. The fact that I'm young, that I'm a woman, that I'm African, and in, let's say, in a South African context, because my business is in South Africa, Black South African, Black African. I've always seen these things as an advantage. I've always seen it as a way to stand out and to not be a part of the crowd, and I use it in all that I do. And so for me, it's actually a very exciting and empowering thing to be, and an empowering time to be at.
Fantastic. And Mvula, let's move down the line here as we tackle this question.
I think for me, it's always the element of surprise when you walk into a room and it's mostly male-dominated, and they're sort of expecting someone else to be following behind you, and actually you have to sort of stop and say, no, but wait a minute, I'm the founder of this business, you know, it stops here. And for them, it's always a shock of, oh, number one, you're young and you're a female. So I always find that being able to break boundaries has been always one of the biggest advantages that have led the path for me. Yeah.
Fantastic. Yeah. Let's move down one more.
For me, I'd say it's exciting as well as it is tough. Most African parents still question, why aren't you looking for a job, especially when you're just starting out? Later on, it's when they come to appreciate your idea of being an entrepreneur and creating other jobs, not just looking for a job.
And Vivian?
Can you go back to your question again?
It was a long row. So it was talking about what it's like setting up and running a business as a young female in Africa.
Okay, thank you. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. First of all, I'd like to thank Forbes Women Africa for the opportunity to be here. My name is Vivian Onano. I'm a Pan-Africanist because I can't identify with one African country, but Kenyans would claim me, and South Africans would claim me on the other side too. So back to your question, Alex. I think going back to what Tanya said, it's an exciting time to be a young person. It's an exciting time to be a young African woman. But again, there are stereotypes that come with being a young African woman running a business. I'm a social entrepreneur, so I get to deal with both business people and politicians. And I think most of the time, when they read my bio, they think I'm a certain age. When I come into the room, they realize that the age that they had sort of stuck to my name is different, right? So then they're like, okay, what is she bringing to the table? What does she know? And now you have to rise to the plate. And I think that is a story that I may share with many on this panel, but also many other young people that I've met across the continent and I've worked with too.
Fantastic. So some of you made it onto the Forbes Under 30 list. And it'd be quite interesting to hear from you how a title or a recognition of that kind of stature, what impact that has on your business, on your career, on where you're going. Who wants to tackle that one first? Navula? Okay, Navula is stepping up. There we go.
Personally, I think the moment a lot of your peers and people who ordinarily would not pay attention to ideas, pay attention to the work you're doing, or accept the level of impact you're actually making with your day-to-day work, the moment they see your name on that list, they sort of would take a step back and say, wait, what? Like, if you're not a person who's an extrovert, and you go about your work because of passion, you're driven by passion, and you're driven by your own goals that you've set for yourself to say, look, if my work can impact the communities that I'm looking at assisting, and they're happy, great. The world doesn't need to know about it. So it's almost that fear of discovery. And then when Forbes finds you, and then everyone sort of starts treating you differently, and I think if the biggest takeaway for me has been, I'm no longer fearful. There are doors that I would be intimidated to go and knock on, but since making the Forbes list, you sort of, you assert yourself, and you can go there and you can knock on that door and say, well, you will make time for me, because someone on this continent actually believes in the work that I'm doing and the impact that I'm making. And if you're not seeing it, just give me a few minutes to prove to you why I need to be sitting across from you. Yeah.
I see some smiles at the end of the panel here. I don't know if you want to weigh in on this particular one.
Oh, I'd love to. So I was actually not among the Forbes 30 under 30, but I was profiled by Forbes Women Africa as one to watch. And I remember the title was The Girl Who Was Dined with Michelle Obama and President Bush. And once the article came out, I got emails and text messages, DMs on Twitter. Now people want to talk to me and want to learn more about my story. But I think the Forbes 30 under 30, but also Forbes Women Africa giving a platform to young women, it gives you the credibility that sometimes people don't give you just because of where you come from or the nature of the business that you're doing or whatever country that you come from. So I think it gives you a voice and it gives you a platform, but also makes you feel like you're part of the global village that sometimes you don't feel like you're connected to. So I think that is a plus from the Forbes team.
Tanya, do you feel that it takes a level of that kind of credibility to make things happen on the continent? That sometimes the greater community is doubting, isn't sure, if it's African, is it really going to hold water? Do you come across those kind of challenges?
Yes, you do. And especially as a young person, because what you'll find is because of the way that we've, I want to say, always done business, it's a very patriarchal way of looking at things. And so when you step into a room, like you very rightfully said, they will look at you as a young person. You may not necessarily have the experience. You may not necessarily have the CV to back up what you claim to be doing. And that's where recognition such as the Forbes 30 under 30 does play a role. But I do also believe that there is opportunities, and especially when it comes to digital branding yourself, just daring to put your foot into those doors by yourself does allow you to gain a certain level of credibility by your own strength as well.
Well, let's touch on that digital question, and I'm going to throw it out to everyone on the panel, because it is a generation of the emoji, the WhatsApp group, the Instagram, and there's probably a generation or two generations up in the room that can't even begin to fathom what that means or how this even works. I mean, it's a traditional background with business cards and email addresses. Some people even might remember doing business on typewriters. Now we're talking about DMing people to get a meeting, or posting a selfie at your launch to try and get that traction. And we often see women doing unbelievably well. I think also they have a sense of style and a sense of flair when it comes to the common selfie. But also you really make it work. And how important is that social media element in marketing yourself and building up that platform? I'm seeing a nod down here. Yeah.
Social media is very important, especially in today's generation. One day I got a call from Ankted, and they told me, we've gone through your profile. It looks very amazing. Kindly let us engage you further through your social media profile. In this day and age, it has come to a point where our social media profile, whether we like it or not, are kind of our resumes in most of the things and most of the opportunities we get. Social media has contributed to more than 80% of our business.
That's amazing, 80%.
More than
And which
80%.
particular social media platform do you use the most that really works for you?
We use all social media platforms, from WhatsApp, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. But we realized on WhatsApp it's very personalized. So if a client is ordering, regardless the huge amount of whatever it is they're ordering, if you DM them, they feel it's very personalized. They keep coming back.
So you're doing a couple of $1,000 deals here on WhatsApp. That's unbelievable, actually unfathomable if you think about it. Nomvula, one of the conversation points that we've had a lot today, and what I felt was a bit of a trend, is that we're seeing young women not only going into business for profit, but there's also a very strong sense of social responsibility in those businesses. Is that something that is a generation Y, a Generation Z? The editor and I were chatting earlier on, and we were talking about Generation Alpha, which is the new generation. This is the kids of the millennials. My goodness. I think we ran out of alphabets, so we had to start at A again. But is this something that's going to become more of a permanent feature rather than just sort of a flash in the pan?
So personally, I became a social entrepreneur before it became super cool to be a social entrepreneur. And people didn't understand what it was. So you would go and say to someone, oh yes, I'm in marketing, but I'm a social entrepreneur. And we're all about impact, and we're about trying to make sure that we leave a sensible amount of impact on the communities we work with. And someone sort of turned their head and be like, we don't fully understand what that is. But I think over the years, it's evolved really, really quickly. I think a lot of people now are very conscious of the brands they want to engage with and the companies they want to engage with, and it comes back down again to the social media aspect as well. If someone's not happy with the way a certain brand or organization treats its employees or its customers, I mean, that can have a huge impact on their bottom line. So I think it now surpasses the Generation Y and the Generation Z aspect of things, because it's creating a more empathetic community where everyone is concerned about what's happening to people around them and the brands they associate themselves with, right down to your clothes and the type of food that you eat, the places you'll pick to go and eat. I think it's become something where a lot of young people want to be accountable. They want to be accountable for their actions. They want to be accountable for where they spend their money. So it definitely is something that it's no longer just about profit. People are definitely a lot more conscious as the years have gone by. Yeah.
Just a thought, and I'm going to kick off with you, Vivian, again, and we're going to move our way here towards Tanya. What is it that young entrepreneurs want from the world? And when I say the world, we're talking about banks, we're talking about investors, we're talking about your clients, your suppliers. What would make your life easier, would make you move faster if the world could give you ... And I'd like you to just sort of complete that sentence. What is the gripe that you have that you think, if we could just sort this part out, we'd actually be moving at a much faster pace?
Okay, that's a good question, but I'm not going to fill your ... that fast. So first of all, I think when you talk about entrepreneurs and social entrepreneurs, the first thing people are going to talk about is access to capital, infrastructure. But I think for me, what's very important is mentorship and network. And that's something that, as young people, we're still struggling to have the right kind of mentorship and the right kind of network, because it's the networks that's going to open the doors. It's the mentorship that's going to help you move to the next level. But then when it comes to also what do we need? We need to be listened to, period. We don't need a structured book that we are supposed to follow. The world is evolving so fast, and as young people, we keep innovating and trying to disrupt the status quo. So we cannot stick to a book. And that's why most of the time you hear young people are restless. Young people cannot be managed. That is not the reality. It's just that we are thinking pretty faster than the other generations used to think, and things are moving at a super fast rate than how things used to work before. So it's up to people to catch up with us, but we're not going to slow down. So we just need to be listened to, and we need the right kind of mentorship and the right kind of support network for us to grow, and also the right kind of platforms.
Strong start there, Vivian. Let's move down the row.
I'd say for me, we need financing to start, to scale, and to grow the businesses. Apart from financing, we also need a lot of information and knowledge, especially in Africa, where we are created to be job seekers instead of job creators. If we had a mind shift right from our education system, teaching young people to look for opportunities, to create opportunities, not just to work for someone else. We also need mentorship, as she said. I'd say we also need a lot of hand-holding along the way. When I started my business, I remember a particular aunt of mine told me, but everyone is making soap. A few days ago, she asked me, can you give me a job? That's the mentality we have in Kenya. After you receive, not just in Kenya, but on Africa, after you receive a number of awards, you realize that is when investors start showing interest. I'd really appreciate if investors showed interest in ideas, not just businesses that have already started. Because the period between idea generation to actually building a startup that can give you profits, it's a complicated process that some young people can easily give up on the way, yet they have ideas that have the capacity to even change the globe.
So I see the point of mentorship coming up quite strongly, and it's quite interesting that you both have mentioned that, because I think in the video you also realized that we had from the highlights from March 8th this year, how one of the ladies mentioned that we should have so many more younger women in the room. It's great having the businesswomen, the government leaders, the organizational heads, but it's really the 18, 16, maybe even 21-year-old woman who's ready to set out into the world, who needs that direction, that guidance, that support to make things happen. And it's fascinating that you've raised this again. Nomvula, on your end, what do you need from the world?
I think institutions need to allow young entrepreneurs to pivot. Like we're saying, there's no set formula to entrepreneurship. It's not the way a lot of people fantasize it. And I feel the moment you sort of change your model or your formula, the system doesn't allow you to. It's almost like, oh, but wait a minute. Just now you were saying you're in events management, and now you're telling us you've, taken a turn. The system needs to pivot with the entrepreneurs. And I think being able to pivot allows that growth and allows you to make mistakes, but you fail forward. So a lot of times you'll find that good ideas and youths with a lot of potential get written off because they've chosen to pivot an idea.
Now, Nomvula, you're talking about pivoting. Let's just quickly jump in there. Are we talking about young people who are kind of going through different opportunities and finding the one that's right for them? Or are we talking about the millennial term of the side hustle, where I am an events manager, but I also run this really cool bonsai online sales business, and I'm also really big into catering. So I'm running a couple of portfolios. This is not the same thing.
Not the same thing. When I talk about an entrepreneur being allowed to pivot, we're talking about young business people who have tried something, right? Not a hustle, something that actually went through the stages of feasibility study, proof of concept, and has decided to say, hey, you know what? This might not be the peak of the ideas that I have. I want to try something new. And I feel when you try and make that shift, I went through it personally, where you want to change career paths, so to say. And when you try and approach the institutions to say, well, this is what I'm considering and this is what I want to add on, the system is quite rigid. It doesn't allow you to try something new.
Unforgiving a bit in some cases, yeah? And Tanya, what do you need from the world to make things happen in the future?
I actually have an example, if you want, of pivoting.
Oh, well, take us through it. There we go. Okay.
So it's you see it a lot in startups. So a startup, by definition, is a business that hasn't yet found its business model. So they could start with one particular business model. I'll use one case, which is these were 3 young guys from Zimbabwe, and they started with an application that would attach itself to WhatsApp that would allow people to make purchases through WhatsApp, through Facebook, and through Instagram, so social selling. That was the original business model. 6 months down the line, they stumbled upon an even bigger business model, an even bigger opportunity, was the fact that in Africa, for a lot of our countries, we don't necessarily buy from a supplier directly, but we'll have our guy, our reseller guy. The guy, you know, we have our electric guy, we have our cosmetics girl, we have the bag lady, and just these resellers, if we're using specific terms, like resellers. And they stumbled upon a reseller network, and they now use the application to connect to resellers, allowing brands to have direct access to a whole new way of distribution. So that would be how a startup could, for example, pivot. To get back to answer your question, what I would like to see more is, and it kind of joins what you were saying in terms of a lot of our funding mechanisms will fund existing businesses. And what I would like to see is more angel investing. So angel investing doesn't necessarily have to be somebody that has $2 million or 20 million shillings in their account, but it can be you and I or anybody working in corporate that has $1,000, $5,000 in their bank accounts investing in a small business or an idea. What's great with that is that there is no one better positioned than somebody living in the city, in the country where that idea is coming from to know if that idea is viable. And by doing so, we'll be able to empower more young people, more startups, more SMEs to actually grow and be able to access more institutionalized funding. So that would be one of the ones. And then the other one that I had in mind was, in terms of our institution, I hear a lot of investing in innovation and looking for those big innovative ideas. And one thing that I would like to see is actually turning our attention away from that 1 in 100 million new tech idea that's going to change the world, but actually look at what are the small businesses that actually have the potential to grow and to create jobs for our youth.
So it's everyone's looking for the next Airbnb or Uber or Uber Eats. And meanwhile, it could be a small, maybe mid-sized idea that could potentially be, a pretty decent return nonetheless. Do you feel that, having dealt with investors and people that you're looking for funding for, do you feel that there's a general sort of, they're expecting too much? They're hoping to find 1 in 2 as opposed to 1 in 10 to invest in.
Yeah. I don't know if it's expecting too much, but to a certain degree, I understand where it comes from. So the amount of effort in terms of whether it's private equity or institutionalized funding or banks or loans, the amount of follow-through and work that has to be accompanied with that initial cash injection going into the business, if it's a small business, a medium-sized business, or a large business, is the same. So they would much rather focus on that 1 in a million than those 20 in 50. So I understand where it is coming from. To answer the question, there is a lot that is required to be able to access these kind of fundings.
Nomvula, you also working in Zimbabwe. Very exciting times, I think, in Zimbabwe at the moment. We were having a chat earlier on about just trying to do normal business in Zimbabwe. What are your hopes in terms of the future for Africa, for young people?
I think it comes back to the mind shift. We need to become more assertive in terms of owning our situations. If we see problems and struggles in our communities, we need to find opportunity in them. Because I think we spend too much time dwelling on everything that's wrong and not asking the key questions of how can I fix it, or how can I get involved, or what position can I take to make a difference. I think if a lot more people stop waiting for assistance from the next person and look within first, I think there'll be a big shift in terms of how Africa will deem itself and the potential that we have.
And I mean, that leaves us with quite a bit of hope. I think I might actually just leave it at that, on that hopeful note, on something optimistic. I'd like to ask you to give these young ladies a big round of applause. And I think to borrow from my colleague Nozipho Mbanjwa in terms of what is the future of young females on the continent, I think it's definitely a thumbs up emoji and that kapow, that firecracker emoji. So thank you very much, ladies. It's been great to have you at the Forbes Woman Africa Regional Forum in East Africa. Thank you so much.